If you have any solutions for me, please drop them in a comment down below. What's going on, everybody? Today we're diagnosing a misfire in my 2007 Yamaha FZ6. Now, if you saw my last video, I just changed spark plugs from the copper to the iridium plugs, which went smoothly, went fine, but it didn't fix the problem. So I had this misfire at idle like this. I had that misfire on the copper plugs, and then that misfire reappeared on the iridium plugs. It only seems to do it at idle or clutching out from a stop. So between like 1 and 2, maybe 2,500 RPM, the bike chugs and lugs and like it drops a cylinder or two. Not really sure. I know one ignition coil takes care of 2 cylinders, so it would make sense if you had a failing coil, the bike would sound like it's running on 2 cylinders all the time, or at least when it's misfiring. But this bike never sounds like it's on 2 cylinders. It sounds like it's at most on 3. So today, we're going to dive in and do the proper way of diagnosing a misfire, which would be start at the plugs, which we know are good. We did this last time. Check the ignition wires, check the coils, check the secondary and primary side of the coil. I'll probably check my crank position sensor because it's easy to check, and hopefully we find something. But with these intermittent problems, it's a pain in the butt to try and diagnose because the problem comes and goes and it's hard to pin down with a multimeter. Since I'm a bit nuts about FZ6 things, about a year or 2 ago I bought a whole new set of ignition coils and wires for this bike, thinking I had an issue, but I ended up not. It was something else, I can't remember. So we've got a whole new set of coils and wires and ends. So if we find something wrong with the ignition coils, or even if we don't, I might just try throwing these in here to rule out the ignition coil from the problem. My only other thinking is that if it's not coils or something ignition related, it's fuel related. It's a bit of a head scratcher. So I'm really hoping we find something funky with the ignition coils. Let's get it. Who doesn't love a good misfire on the weekend? Alright, just to recap, we had to take out the side plastics here and there. That's your 2 4mm there. To get the tank off, it's 2 5mm Allens at the top, 1 10mm right here. Lift the tank. I like to put a little baggie around the fuel line so it doesn't drip fuel all over my stuff and I don't have to smell it. Then next, to get the ignition coils out, which are tucked back here, airbox, battery box, coils. So airbox is Phillips to get the perimeter, and then you have to get these hoses off, and then you have some, I think 4mm Allen keys under here to get where the airbox attaches to the ITBs. Pull it off. You've got one sneaky hose around the side here you got to watch out for, and then battery box, just some 10mm like there and there. Get your main relay out of the way, under your battery post, slide, get it all out of the way. It'll be easy. Alright, now taking out the coils back here can be a little tricky because this whole battery box is just in the way and generally very cramped space. So pulling it forward, you figure out that the secondary leads go down through the rubber dam, which can be a mess to get back into place, so take note of what the rubber dam, where it's positioned and how that all comes together. But for now, we're just going to pull this out. I'm going to put some tape on the left side coil and the right side coil so I know which goes where, and then we'll rip it out and get our multimeter on some stuff. Let's do it. Alright, we got the coils out and on the ground. Now it's to go over everything. The primary coil resistance on this coil here is supposed to be between 1.53 and 2.07 ohms. As always with your multimeter, check to make sure your ohms read 0 when you connect the leads. This is a good multimeter that measures true ohms, not including the leads. So here, getting it on the primary side, 1.8, that's great. Well, it's at least the part is good. And 1.8 on the other primary side. So we've got 2 primary circuits that are good. And then for the secondary side, what you have to do is you have to take off the end caps, or take off the pencil leads like this thing here, so that isn't factored into the resistance. And the spec you're looking for is 12,000 to 18,000 ohms, and this is of course measuring, or the spec is at 20 degrees Celsius. Right, so we've got 14.7 thousand ohms. So just shy of 15,000, and that's right in the middle of the spec. So that coil's good. On to the next one, 14.8, we're good. And that's that. So we know the coils are good, and that's, well, good information sort of, because we still haven't found the problem yet. Next thing I checked is these caps here. So I've taken off the rubber tip on the end, but these little caps, or spark plug caps, they're supposed to measure 10,000 ohms. So we leave our multimeter set to under 20,000. Connect this, get this at the top. Yeah, we got 9.6 thousand. So that's good. I've checked all 4. They're all good. So I'm a bit confused. I'm going to check the other set of ignition coils I have to see if they're any different and make my decision from there. Okay, I've got one other idea. I'm going to use a hairdryer to heat up the ignition coils to see if I can fluctuate the resistance or see if I create a short or an open circuit by heating them up. Now, I know the manual tells you to measure the resistance at 20 degrees Celsius, but in practice, the coils do get hot when you're riding on the bike just from where they're placed above the engine and everything, so maybe this will be able to reproduce the fault I've been seeing. So at this point, I've gone through the manual, I've checked everything on the ignition system that could be problematic. I've checked the fuses, I've checked the battery voltage, it's great, like 12.8 when there's nothing connected. I've checked the spark plugs, I've checked because we know they're brand new and we know they were a problem on the iridium as well as the copper. I've checked the spark plug caps, they're all good. The only thing I found in this ignition system that might be a little bit suspicious is there was some grime inside the boot here. So I cleaned that out with some parts cleaner, got in there, spent a lot of time cleaning them out, and that looks good now. So maybe it was making a bad connection on one of the plugs and that's why it wasn't good, but we just put new plugs in. I don't know. I checked the ignition coils, primary and secondary, as you saw multiple times. I checked the crankshaft position sensor. It was within spec. Checked all the switches. Well, we know the switches work because the bike runs just fine. I just misfires here and there. And basically the last thing is replace the ECU, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to put the bike back together. Maybe I just had a loose connection on the top of the spark plug, but I'm kind of doubtful because it misfired on the old plugs and the new plugs. So this might be fuel related. If you've got a great idea, drop it in a comment down below. Either way, I'm going to put the bike back together, start it up, and we'll know. I'll take it for a ride, then we'll know. Well, that's a wrap on working on the FZ6 for today, even though we don't have a conclusion. It still misfires. So to recap what we went over, we checked spark plug gap. Later in the day today, I pulled the plugs out and gapped down the iridium plugs from 31 thou to about 27 thou. So now they're in the range that Yamaha recommends even for the old plugs. So if that was a problem, it's fixed, but it didn't really help. It helped a little bit, like it improved the misfire a little bit, but it's not completely gone. So we gapped down the plugs. We checked the resistance on the caps, we checked the resistance on the secondary and primary side, checked the crank position sensor, all of that checked out within spec. I checked the throttle position sensor by going through diagnostic mode and rolled into it, and there's no dead spots, it moves real smooth, it goes down to 16 and up to 99, so that's all within spec. I'm really at a loss. I must conclude that the misfire or the bogging, chuttering issue is coming from the fuel system, not the ignition system. So I think my next course of action is basically to pull the fuel rail, pull out the injectors, and then turn them on while I spray parts cleaner through them, basically clean the injector. Because my only thinking would be that basically at those low load scenarios where you're at 2,000 RPM and then you go mash it and you increase the load, that basically if one injector isn't flowing right, it's going to stutter the engine. So that's about it. The only other thing I can think about is if I possibly damaged the fuel pump while I was filming the video of riding till empty. But to my understanding, running a pump a little bit dry for a couple seconds is fine, but I've been wrong before. So if you have any solutions for me, please drop them in a comment down below. For once, I'm asking you guys for help, and if you could give me a direction to go in, that would be amazing. So I know wasn't showing you something, but I hope you learned something from this video. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a good day.